If you've driven University Avenue in Cedar Falls, it doesn't take long to realize that the road is desperately in need of repair. But exactly how to repair the road has been a constant topic of discussion over much of the past year. You might even say the city and residents are going round and round on the topic. The city's preferred alternative features 6 roundabouts on the University Avenue corridor, and many in the community are skeptical that the roundabouts are a desirable solution on the roadway. We decided to go to a place where a similar plan was enacted to see just how things have changed a year later. Prairie to Chien, Wisconsin, a city of nearly 6,000, has a major arterial road in Wisconsin 35, which leads through the business district in town. This includes restaurants, both locally owned and chains, large retail centers such as Walmart and Cabela's, factories, and small home-owned businesses. In Prairie to Chien, the Wisconsin DOT determined that the best way to repair the old and damaged 35 would be to include roundabouts in the design, 3 roundabouts in a row. The idea met with resistance, much as the idea of roundabouts in Cedar Falls has met with resistance. Many of the concerns came from the businesses, with many predicting an unpleasant effect on business in town. Summertime construction on this roadway would make it difficult for residents and guests to get to the local businesses during a typically busy summer tourism season. Complicating matters is the railroad line that runs parallel to 35. There were concerns over how traffic would be able to go through a roundabout in the event that a train was passing through. To combat this, the roundabouts have a unique feature, very large and bright signs that will light up when a train is approaching, warning drivers that they should continue driving to avoid jamming traffic. In practice, this is no different than the stoplight system. Traffic simply builds up until drivers only have the option of continuing straight through the intersection. The same happens with a roundabout, with no problems that we were able to see. Something that we've been hearing quite a bit about here in Cedar Falls is the perceived safety issues with roundabouts. City News reporter Anton Ryder volunteered to make a lap of the roundabout on foot to see just what awaits pedestrians. Our experiment was a success, with Anton coming back across to the other side safe and sound. No business owners would agree to an on-camera interview, but they were all more than happy to speak with us. Our first stop was a local restaurant owner. Ali Cambry hails from Europe, where he grew up with roundabouts. He said that he personally did not have a problem navigating them, but he noted his concerns about older drivers who may not be used to roundabouts. When asked about how business was affected, he told us that there was a downturn during the construction process, but now that construction is completed, his flow of customers has returned to normal levels. His restaurant is a few blocks away from the roundabouts, so we decided to move a bit closer to find out about businesses that were just next door. We spoke to Joanne Evans, who actually owns 3 businesses right next to the roundabouts. She had similar sentiments as Ali, although she was more critical of roundabouts in general. She said that the construction process was difficult, and it made it difficult for customers to get to the local businesses. However, Joanne, much like Ali, said that business has returned to normal, and conceded that the roundabouts don't seem to be as bad as she had predicted. As we were able to interpret it, the roundabouts themselves did nothing to hinder business, just the construction process itself, which would need to be done regardless. With that in mind, the predictions in Prairie to Chien that businesses would suffer a drastic downturn seem to be unfounded. In fact, there are no less than 3 brand new businesses that are being built right in the midst of the roundabouts. A brand new True Value Hardware is nearing completion, as is a financial center, and ground just broke on a new multi-million-dollar medical center as well. To get another look at how businesses were affected, we spoke to the president and CEO of the Prairie to Chien Chamber of Commerce.
We had exploratory meetings at the very beginning, talking to our members, talking to our businesses of what to expect and what the expectations were. It started in May and actually completed by almost like the 1st of November. At first, the businesses were very concerned. They were concerned about how business was going to actually be drawn to their business, especially with the opening of their business being closed for the road construction. As the Chamber of Commerce in Prairie to Chien, we had direct conversation with our members almost on a weekly basis. I think communication is key. If the businesses don't know what the expectations are, if they don't know when things are going to be happening, there's going to be so much miscommunication. And I think it's better if you actually stop that at the very beginning and just leave the lines of communication open on a regular basis. If you don't have strong communication between the city, other organizations throughout Prairie to Chien, and the residents and chamber members, I think you're really going to struggle, because the lack of communicating is only going to raise a lot of questions, and it's so important to get that information out there right in the beginning of any project. So I would encourage any other community that is actually going to be looking to do the roundabouts in the future, start immediately with getting the word out there, what the timeline is, what the expectations are, and start working together to actually solve any problems that you may perceive to have. I think it's really eliminated a lot of the traffic congestion in the downtown Prairie du Chien. The traffic flow goes very easily. If you're coming from either La Crosse or Madison, you can get through downtown Prairie du Chien very, very easily and maneuvers very, very well.
We also had a chance to speak with several government officials for their take on the issue. The roundabouts of Prairie du Chien differ from those in Cedar Falls because they were mandated by the state rather than a city council choice. Thus, the city simply had to work with citizens and businesses to ease the transition.
Council meetings were overflowing, public information meetings were jammed, and the vast majority of those that appeared and talked were opposed to the project and opposed to the installation of the roundabouts specifically. A majority, I would think, of people that were opposed have either come to tolerate them or accept them. I mean, there's still going to be a minority that absolutely do not want them removed. We don't hear much from that minority anymore. Obviously, the predictions of what the detractors thought prior to the installation, for example, that it would destroy the center of the city as far as economics and business development, have not come to pass. The traffic flows would decrease considerably, has not come to pass. That we would be dealing with accidents and injuries has just not come to pass. So,
and probably one of the biggest things was the change. I mean, everybody was worried about how it was going to end up, and it was the big change and everything, and I think it ended up very well as the change went through and everybody's adapted to them.
They've proven to be very effective for traffic patterns. I think the community's adapted to them fairly well. From our standpoint, for example, snow removal, we've got a pretty quick system worked out immediately the first winter on snow removal patterns. It worked out very well. I think one other perspective too from the safety aspect is pedestrian safety. I think people have really adapted to pedestrians in the roundabouts, and the pedestrians in turn have adapted to the way the traffic moves through them. And I've noticed that I think that the pedestrian safety has really been enhanced with roundabouts versus a controlled intersection where you have somebody that's trying to get through that yellow light in a hurry and you got somebody stepping off the curb. It doesn't happen at the roundabouts. People are very aware of the circumstances, very aware of the situation, and it's just really good for pedestrians.
The roundabouts that we have here are 3 in a row, and as you make your way south to the end of the town, you start hitting stoplights again. And I often think I'm sitting here at a stoplight for 60 seconds, but it seems like minutes. And it's like, boy, it'd be nice to be having a roundabout right here, because you just basically maneuver around. Only have to look one direction, but it's constant flow of traffic, saving on gas and time. So.
Everyone we spoke with, whether they were in favor of roundabouts or not, had several things they agreed on. First, roundabouts are safe, although different people agreed with this to a different extent. Second, everyone agreed that the city of Prairie du Chien did an excellent job in communicating with businesses as to what sort of changes they could expect, as well as giving them a time frame for the different stages of the project. So there you have it. The question is, what did this trip teach us about roundabouts and the public? Well, we learned that the roundabout is simply a different way of doing things and has certain strengths and weaknesses, just as a stoplight has certain strengths and weaknesses. In getting our footage, we ended up taking several laps through the roundabouts, sometimes driving through all 3 in a row, sometimes going halfway and doubling back, and sometimes just going through one to see how easy it was to access a business. Speaking as a driver who's been driving through Prairie du Chien for the better part of a decade, including when the intersections in question were governed by stoplights, I was able to cover the 3-block distance consistently faster and smoother than before. In particular, it used to be nearly impossible to catch a green light at the intersection of Highway 35 and Black Hawk Avenue, which leads to a bustling downtown district that feels a lot like our own Main Street. Now, traffic flows smoothly. It's easy to say that roundabouts are simply change for the sake of change. I feel ambivalent towards roundabouts myself. I don't have any real preference for them, but on the other hand, I have no real problems with them. However, the trip to Prairie du Chien gave me a working example of how change, when handled correctly, isn't always a bad thing. Back to you in the studio.